So, hello my fellow paranormal enthusiasts. Hello and welcome from Necessary Evil. Anyway, today's video is going to be a four-parter. This is part one of 4 parts. The subject matter and the title is The Tech Behind the Paranormal Investigator. As everybody should be very aware of, within the last decade, electronics have advanced quite a bit. And so the prices of these electronics have gone down quite a bit, which allows us now in the paranormal world to get our hands on this stuff and become more thorough and more credible in paranormal investigations and so forth. So the objective behind this is I'm going to be going over a lot of the terms, the knowledges, generally for those who are thinking about getting into it, and the different devices and the specs and what the terms mean, and those who already have some equipment and plan on maybe in the foreseeable future upgrading their equipment, and terms that should be aware of, be familiar with. I'm going to be getting a little bit techie on it, so those who are not too sure about it, if you have any questions, leave the comments below, and you can either Google it or leave some comments, and if I get enough of it, then I'll do another video just on all these terms and phrases that I'm going to be using. Anyway, so yes, this is going to be a 4-parter. It turned out as a 1 until we started getting into it a little bit more, and there's just too much information. So this is part 1, the introduction, and part 2 is going to be on audio, the recording. Part 3 is going to be on video, the recording. And then part 4 is going to be on playback and analysis. So we'll be getting into a bunch of that. We will not be backing or stating any particular manufacturer or maker model, because we just want to get out the information, basically the unique world of the paranormal investigator and the things you should be aware of and the equipment that's out there and the terms used and how to read them and so forth. So we'll put out the information, and based on that, make the decision yourself what particular piece of equipment you want to buy. So this one, the intro, this is basically the intro, and now I'm going to get into what I call the miscellaneous devices in this part 1. So the humorous thing on all these electronic devices is cost. You gotta remember that. So, man, these devices can go relatively cheap and can go into the thousands of dollars. Okay, so the 2 reasons why they do this. Reason number 1 is just plain and simple, the electronics inside, the quality of the device, and its specifications and what it's built to do. So that each person, each investigator, they know what they're trying to do and what they want to record and how well and how much they're willing to cost. So you go from there. Now the one that is rather upsetting is these devices in which they do inject all these stupid bells and whistles. And this is different things that these greedy people do for just to make $1 and try to make us believe that this one is better than that one, even though they do the exact same thing. Not better, it just looks cooler and it costs more. No. So that's what we'll be getting into. First device on my list, the old-fashioned, plain and straight, inexpensive, nice, simple to use electromagnetic field detector, or known as the K2. K2 is a relatively simple device, and so is electronics. You have an antenna, you have the specific electronic chip for receiving, detecting, and analyzing an electromagnetic field, and then you have the display and you have the case. All that is in a very can be held in the antenna and the display and the electronics themselves can fit 2 by 2 inch square. It doesn't take much. There's not a lot to a K2 meter. and you got the one that everybody's familiar with. Well, so you've got the K2 meter, but then you got a lot of these bells and whistles. And this is what you need to be cautious of and read it and see what you want, because they're nothing but, they don't do anymore, they're not any better, they're not any faster, they just look cool. So a lot of things what they'll do in the world of the K2 meter is they'll put it in a big fancy box. So the K2 it's not very big because there's nothing there to it, but they'll put it in a big box anyway. The standard K2 meter, it just uses some LEDs for this display. Simple, easy, to the point, does a job. Now then, you start adding these bells and whistles and make it warble and warn and put an audio warning on it that it picked up something, like that adds cost. Doesn't add effectiveness, it adds cost. And then you got the display. And some of these manufacturers will get all kinds of fancy. The easiest and least expensive of the displays is simple. 5 LEDs or 6 LEDs. The more LEDs that light up, the stronger and closer, the stronger the field. Not the closer the field, the stronger the field. Plain and simple, does a job. Now, you do anything else, start adding anything fancy, like for example, an analog view meter, where you see the little needle going up and down. Those little view meters are kind of expensive, so they unnecessarily add to the cost of the meter. So they'll put in fancy cases, they'll add some audio stuff, which is more electronics, and a speaker, which adds to the cost, and they do the fancy bells and whistles on the display. Unnecessary. But they're out there, and if you want something cool, and you want to spend the extra money, it's there. So, second device on the list. The REM pod. Yeah, we'll switch to the REM pod. So on the REM pod. REM pod is a little bit more expensive because it's a little bit more complex. Oh, I have to digress and go back to the electromagnetic field detector. Okay, the simple one is a K2. All right, there is a more expensive device that's called a millimeter. And what that device is, it's used in the electronics industry, and it is much better quality, much more sensitive electronics, more sophisticated electronics, and it's a calibrated device. And what that device does, it actually measures the strength of an electromagnetic field. Reason being is that being in a strong magnetic field for long amounts of time is harmful to our health. And it also used because if you run into an area and all of a sudden the electromagnetic field jumps up and it gets into the danger area, that also means that something is wrong. There's a device, a cut wire, or ground, something someplace, and it needs to be looked at, it needs to be repaired. So that's what they use a millimeter for, and yes, it is quite a bit more expensive. And also, it's just supposedly, it has to be sent back to a quality control group, and it has to be recalibrated every so often. I don't know, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. So yeah, that's the more expensive one. So, now to jump again, and let's go back into the REM pod. REM pod, it does the same thing as the K2 meter, but it does it in a different way. And it's a little bit more sophisticated and more expensive electronics. So, what a REM pod does is, the REM pod has an antenna, and it extends, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 inches. And when you turn on a REM pod, what it does is it creates its own electromagnetic field around that antenna and around the REM pod. And what it does is it has electromagnetic field already set up in there, and then it has electronics inside the REM pod that measures the electromagnetic field that it's putting out. Any other type of energy that comes within a certain range of the REM pod, it will interact with the electromagnetic field already given off by the REM pod. That'll change the field, the electronics picks it up and goes into alarm. So it says something else has just come into contact with its electromagnetic field. A little bit more sensitive, a little bit further range. It's sensitive to human beings that come close, because remember, we have energy and the cell phones and stuff, so be careful with that. So that's the basics behind the REM pod. Okay, now bells and whistles. All right, what they do on the REM pod is they'll put it in a larger case, charge you more money for no reason. The antenna is just a basic 8, 10, 12-inch antenna that needs to be pulled out all the way for the electromagnetic field to be generated. Some of these guys will get all fancy and put curls and stuff on it and stretch the antenna all the way across it and make it go across this nice big boxy curlies and stuff. It doesn't do anything. Another thing they'll do is, again, add all kinds of fancy bells and whistles and sounds and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't help you any. It's not more accurate. It's just so they can charge more for it. Now then, also what they like to do frequently is they'll add other sensors to the REM pod. Rather than just being an electromagnetic field detector, they'll add other sensors to it. So, for example, they can add. I've seen some with vibration sensors on it. So if somebody hits a table or something like that, it'll go off. Temperature monitors. Some of them will have expensive, cheap proximity sensors that don't really work very good, but throw it in there, it's a couple chips, charge you a lot more money. The particular model that we have in Necessary Evil, we got the one with the temperature sensor as an add-on on ours, and we like that one. And what it does is when you first turn the device on, the REM pod temperature portion of it, as soon as it turns on, it measures the temperature, the ambient temperature, within 2 or 3 feet. It just measures that temperature. It doesn't monitor the temperature itself. It uses that as a stability, because it's not looking at temperature, it's looking at change in temperature. So you turn it on, it measures the temperature, and then it waits. If the temperature increases 0.5 degrees, there's an LED display and an audio alarm that will go red. If it decreases a half a degree or more, the alarm will go off and the LED will be red. So we'll know if it's getting warmer or getting cooler. We thought it was an interesting add-on, so that's why we purchased that particular model. So again, buyer beware. Okay, 1, 2. The Ovilus, that devices. We don't have much credibility here on the Ovilus. So the Ovilus, what that device does, it's really very simple. It has a database and a memory chip, SD card, whatever, or onboard memory, with a dictionary of words. Now, the dictionary of words, because of the size and the sophistication of the Ovilus, is not that much. It might be 1,000 words, it might be 10,000 words, but it's not that much. And it's also depending on what part of the planet you're on. So if you buy an Ovilus and you live in the United States, it will have those words in it. If you buy one in Japan, it'll have a different set of words on it. And the words and the phrases in the Ovilus can be programmed by the owner. So you can put whatever words you want to in it. Again, it's limited, which I find very uncomfortable. So it's really easy to trick. It's easy to fake it. Again, 10,000 words in the English language is nothing. And the idea that you could program the words in it yourself, too much human intervention. So, they might have sent it to you with 10,000 words programmed into it, and out of those 10,000 words, there's not one name, or not one state, or not one city, and all of it. And if somebody turns around, well, if you ask what state it's in, or if what's the name of the spirit that's in that room, and that name is not in the dictionary on that memory card, it's not going to say it. Now, or on the other hand, you can turn around and say you want the name of the spirit to be God. You can do 4 different versions of that and have it show up numerous different ways. So it's, like I said, just too much human intervention. Now, how does it pick which word? Because they're saying that the spirits are picking the words. No. There's a couple of different ways, depending on which model you buy, on how that ovulus functions. And what it is, one way, the simplest and cheapest way, is they have something that's, there's a piece of electronics called a random number generator. And it sits there and runs and it just says, kick out this word, kick out this word, kick out this word. It's just random. Okay? Sometimes what they'll do is, the better quality devices, they might add a chip to detect EMF, sound, and so if there's a sound made, or if the EMF changes, or something like that, or a vibration sensor, and that will trigger it to kick out a word. So, is the spirits? I told you the electronics and physics behind it. Make up your mind, you do it your way. Next on the list, the spirit box. Boy, has this thing gone through some iterations. Oh my goodness gracious. The first simple spirit box. A spirit box is really an FM receiver originally. An FM receiver, you know, regular like you had in the 1970s, you got now. You turn the knob, goes up and down, 98.9, 100.3, whatever tune you want to listen to. Okay, but on a spirit box, it's automatically programmed in the electronics that it scans the FM band. So it starts at the low end, I think it's around 88 megahertz, and then goes to the high end, which I think is like 900 megahertz. And it just constantly scans that band. And then, again, the sensor, I'm going to on a limb and say most of them are triggered by some type of an EMF sensor. And supposedly the spirits can talk through that. Either they say words through the FM band, or they pick words and it'll stop so it'll stop at a certain frequency, say a word, and then come on. So it's constantly scanning the FM band. Okay. From then, now they've gotten fancy. So the first original devices that first come out were, they scanned the FM band and they scanned from the low end to the high end. Okay. At a certain rate. Okay, then they started getting fancier and they started doing some fancy programming so that it can scan from low to high or high to low. And you can change the speed at which it scans the FM band. Okay? Same device, not any better, not any worse, but they put a couple more switches in it, so they're going to charge you more for it. Then they went from there to the dual FM band spirit box. So it's the same box, a little larger, but it's got 2 receivers. So one scans from bottom to top, and one scans from top to bottom. Reverse. Okay. Then they added an AM/FM scanner. So now you have 2 scanners and a spirit box, but one of them is scanning the AM band, AM radio, and one is scanning the FM band. You're scanning more frequencies. Is it any better? I put out the information, you make the choice. And you purchase whichever way you want. Me, we just got the standard SB7 spirit box. Okay, next one to get into. Last but not least, these laser grid transmitters. Buyer beware. These things have so many design flaws with them. Honestly, no credibility whatsoever. So what you got is you got a power supply, you've got a frequency, and then you've got a bank of LEDs. Now then, depending on the quality is how that thing works, because there's several problems. Number one, the source of the power, as it changes, so does the LEDs change. So if it starts getting a little bit on the low end, you're going to start seeing some strange things and think you got somebody going through going through the grid, and when it's not, just that the power's getting low. It's not stabilized. Okay, next problem. Those LEDs on that grid are not constantly on all the time. They turn on and they turn off at a fast rate that we can't see. The problem with that is, depending on how good the electronics inside the grid, the laser grid thing, transmitter is, it's a pulse width, how long does the LED stay on versus how long it stays off, because it doesn't stay on all the time to conserve power and not to overheat the LED. Plus there's a frequency. That frequency can change back and forth. And that's when you'll start seeing on these LEDs, just when you start seeing things that look like they're going through the wall, but really they're not. Then you've got the delivery system on how that frequency and that pulse width is set for each individual using a video camera. Okay. The laser grid is on and off at a certain frequency. Your camera, which I'll get into later on, has got this specification called frames per second. So it's not looking at the laser grid all the time. It's doing it at anywhere from 24 to 120 frames per second. So if your camera isn't steady, then that frequency is changing a little bit, and your laser grid's changing a little bit, that's when you'll start getting these things look like they're going across the screen. And okay, so I would say pretty much that's all of them on what I call as miscellaneous. So I hope you enjoyed part 1. Hope you stay around and watch for when I get together and do 2, 3, and 4. And like I said, if you have please any comments, leave below. Any questions, any terminology or the statements of electronics or whatever that I made, leave below. And if I get enough feedback, I'll make a feedback video. Okay, so saying goodbye from the dark side. These are my final words. Later.